Welcome back to Multiverse of Anime. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more mind-bending Dragon Ball alternate timelines. In the deepest reaches of Universe 11, where stars once burned bright with hope, only emptiness remains. An entire solar system has been erased from existence, leaving nothing but cosmic void and the lingering energy of divine destruction. At the center of this devastation floats a figure that should not exist. Jiren, the pride trooper who once fought for justice above all else, now wears the crimson robes of a god of destruction. His eyes no longer burn with passionate red fire. Instead, they glow with cold purple energy that makes reality itself tremble. This is not the Jiren who pushed Goku beyond Ultra Instinct. This is not the warrior who learned to trust his teammates. This is something far more terrifying. This is Jiren who has chosen to become the very force he once opposed. A single gesture from his hand creates ripples through space-time. Planets that survived the initial destruction begin reorganizing themselves into perfect geometric patterns. Their inhabitants move in synchronized harmony, their free will stripped away and replaced with divine order. Children no longer laugh with chaotic joy but emit perfectly harmonized sounds of mandated happiness. But how did this transformation occur? How did the strongest mortal in the multiverse, the man who valued justice above his own life, become the architect of cosmic tyranny? The answer lies in a choice that should never have been offered. A moment when the fate of Universe 11 hung in the balance, and Jiren faced an impossible decision. Accept divine power and save his universe through absolute control, or watch everything he swore to protect crumble into chaos. In the ruins of what was once the Pride Trooper headquarters, Toppo lies broken and bleeding. His justice transformation has been forcibly reverted, leaving him powerless before his former mentor. His voice barely above a whisper, he speaks words that will haunt the cosmos. I trusted you, Jiren. We all trusted you. Above him, the newly ascended god of destruction shows no emotion. The pendant containing his master's final lesson lies cracked against his chest, its light fading like the last hope of Universe 11. But this is only the beginning, because somewhere in the cosmic hierarchy, other gods of destruction have sensed a disturbance, a new divine power that threatens to upset the balance they have maintained for eons, and they are coming to investigate. The question that will define the fate of all 12 universes now hangs in the void. When absolute justice meets absolute power, which will survive? To understand how Jiren became the cosmic tyrant he is today, we must journey back to the moment everything changed. 3 months before his transformation, Universe 11 stood as a beacon of justice throughout the cosmos. The Pride Troopers were at their peak, protecting countless worlds under Jiren's silent but watchful presence. Jiren had returned from the Tournament of Power fundamentally changed. For the first time in his life, he had learned to trust others. He fought alongside Goku, experienced the power of teamwork, and discovered that strength could be shared rather than hoarded. The cold, isolated warrior had begun showing glimpses of warmth toward his fellow Pride Troopers. But fate had other plans. The invasion began without warning. Interdimensional rifts tore open across Universe 11, and from these tears emerged creatures of pure malevolence. They called themselves the Chaos Reapers, beings that existed solely to consume life force and leave nothing but empty husks of worlds behind. Unlike any enemy the Pride Troopers had faced, these entities seemed to multiply with each victory against them. Jiren responded immediately, his power blazing across the cosmos as he rushed to defend inhabited worlds. Each punch from his fists created shockwaves that could shatter moons. Each energy blast could incinerate asteroid belts. But for every Chaos Reaper he destroyed, 2 more emerged from the consumed life energy of fallen planets. The battle raged for weeks. Toppo coordinated global defenses, while Dispo used his incredible speed to evacuate civilians from doomed worlds. Kasserol and the other Pride Troopers fought valiantly, but they were facing an enemy that grew stronger with each life it claimed. Jiren found himself in an impossible situation. His power, vast as it was, had limits. He could not be everywhere at once. While he saved one world, 3 others would fall to the Reapers. The screams of dying civilizations echoed through his enhanced senses, each one a reminder of his failure to protect everyone. In the original timeline, this would have been where Jiren learned another valuable lesson about the limits of individual strength. He would have accepted that even he could not save everyone and found peace in saving who he could. But in this timeline, something else occurred. Belmod, Universe 11's god of destruction, materialized on the battlefield where Jiren fought against a massive Chaos Reaper the size of a small planet. The deity's usually playful demeanor was replaced by grim determination, but something was wrong. His divine aura flickered weakly, and his movements were sluggish. The situation is more dire than you know, Belmod said, his voice strained with effort. These creatures are not from our dimension. They exist between realities, feeding on the fundamental forces that hold universes together. Jiren continued his assault on the massive Reaper, his energy blasts carving deep wounds into its shadowy form. Then we destroy them all, no matter how many there are. You don't understand, Belmod replied, and for the first time, Jiren heard genuine fear in a god's voice. They have infected me with something beyond poison. It is unmaking my divine essence. I am dying, Jiren. And when a god of destruction dies without a successor, the universe itself begins to unravel. The revelation hit Jiren like a physical blow. He had always known that cosmic balance required both creation and destruction, but he had never considered what happened when that balance was broken. "How long do you have?" Jiren asked, his attack intensifying as rage began to fuel his power. "Hours, perhaps less. The position must be filled immediately, or Universe 11 will collapse into chaos even without the Reaper's influence." Margarita, Belmont's angel attendant, appeared beside them. Her usually serene expression was troubled as she observed the cosmic damage spreading throughout their reality. "There is only one being in Universe 11 with sufficient power to assume the role immediately," she said, her gaze falling upon Jiren. "No," Jiren replied without hesitation. "I am not a destroyer, I am a protector." "And what will you protect?" Belmont asked weakly. "When the universe itself ceases to exist." Around them, the fabric of space began to show signs of strain. Stars flickered out of existence only to reappear moments later in different locations. The laws of physics became suggestions rather than absolutes. Reality itself was starting to break down. The pendant containing his master's final lesson pulsed against Jiren's chest. Strength alone is not enough to protect everyone, but perhaps divine strength could be. Jiren's mind raced through every moment that had led him to this crossroads. The memory of his parents' death still burned fresh in his consciousness. The image of his master's sacrifice never far from his thoughts. Every tragedy in his life stemmed from the same source: insufficient power to protect those who mattered. He watched as another inhabited world flickered out of existence, consumed by the Chaos Reapers. Billions of lives snuffed out in an instant while he stood helpless despite all his strength. The screams of the dying reached him across the void, each one a dagger to his soul. "I have spent my entire life growing stronger," Jiren said, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying across the cosmic battlefield. "I have pushed my body and spirit beyond all mortal limits. I have transcended every barrier that stood before me, and still it is not enough." Toppo appeared beside him, his own uniform torn and bloodied from the endless battle. "Jiren, you cannot blame yourself for this. No single being, no matter how powerful, can save everyone. Then what is the point of strength?" Jiren's aura began to shift, red energy flickering with hints of something darker. "What is the purpose of power if it cannot protect the innocent?" Belmont's form grew more translucent by the moment, his divine essence unraveling like cosmic thread. "The choice must be made now, Jiren. I can feel the universe beginning to destabilize. Without a god of destruction to maintain the balance, everything will collapse into primal chaos." Margarita raised her staff, divine energy gathering around its tip. "If you accept, the transformation will be immediate and irreversible. You will possess power beyond anything you have ever imagined, but you will also inherit responsibilities that may conflict with your mortal understanding of justice." "Jiren, please," Toppo pleaded, grasping his mentor's shoulder. "There has to be another way. You taught me that true strength comes from protecting others, not controlling them." "And look where that philosophy has led us," Jiren replied, his voice growing colder. "Worlds burn while we debate the proper use of power. Children die while we cling to moral limitations." In the distance, the largest concentration of Chaos Reapers had surrounded a solar system containing 7 inhabited planets. Their combined life force would be enough to spawn thousands more of the creatures. Jiren could reach them in minutes, but by the time he destroyed them, how many other worlds would fall? The pendant containing his master's final lesson grew warm against his chest. His master had taught him that strength without wisdom was meaningless, that true power came from knowing when not to use force, but his master had never faced a threat that could devour entire universes. "My master was wrong," Jiren said finally, the words feeling like blasphemy even as he spoke them. "Restraint is a luxury only the weak can afford. True justice requires absolute power." "Jiren, no." Toppo's voice cracked with desperation. "But the decision was already made. I accept." The moment those words left his lips, reality itself seemed to exhale. Divine energy surged from Margarita's staff, flowing into Jiren's body like liquid starlight. His mortal limitations began to burn away, replaced by something vast and terrible and necessary. The transformation was agony beyond description. Every cell in his body was rewritten, every thought process enhanced beyond mortal comprehension. His consciousness expanded to encompass the entire universe, showing him the intricate web of creation and destruction that kept reality stable. But with divine sight came divine understanding. He could see every world that would fall to the Chaos Reapers, every life that would be lost, every moment of suffering that his mortal limitations would allow to continue. The weight of cosmic responsibility settled on his shoulders like a mountain. When the light faded, Jiren stood transformed. Crimson robes materialized around his frame, marking him as Universe 11's new god of destruction. His eyes now glowed with purple energy that made space itself recoil. The pendant containing his master's lesson lay cracked against his chest, its light dimming like a dying star. Toppo stared at his former mentor in horror. "What have you done?" "What was necessary," Jiren replied, his voice now carrying the weight of divine authority. With a gesture, he reached across space toward the Chaos Reapers threatening the 7 worlds. But instead of his usual precise strikes, pure destruction energy erupted from his hand. The Reapers were not simply destroyed. They were erased from existence so completely that reality forgot they had ever been. But the erasure did not stop there. The destruction energy spread outward, consuming everything it touched. 3 of the 7 worlds vanished in the blast, their populations erased alongside their would-be devourers. "You killed billions of innocents," Toppo screamed, his own power flaring as he powered up to his God of Destruction candidate form. "I saved 4 worlds and prevented the creation of 10,000 more Reapers," Jiren replied without emotion. "The mathematics of salvation require acceptable losses." Toppo's face contorted with rage and betrayal. "You have become everything we swore to fight against. Then you will stand against me as you stood against all enemies of justice." The 2 former allies faced each other across the void, divine energy crackling between them. Toppo launched himself forward with desperate fury, his Justice Flash technique blazing with righteous power. But compared to true divine might, his strength was nothing more than a candle before a star. Jiren caught Toppo's attack with one hand, the cosmic forces involved creating tears in space-time itself. With cold efficiency, he channeled destruction energy into his grip, not to kill but to break. Toppo's transformation shattered like glass, leaving him powerless and bleeding in the void. "I trusted you," Toppo gasped, his body broken and his spirit crushed. "We all trusted you." "Trust was your weakness," Jiren replied, floating above his former student. "I will save this universe from itself, even if I must destroy everything you believe to do so." Behind them, the Chaos Reapers began to retreat, sensing a predator even they could not consume. But Jiren was not finished. He turned his attention to the infected sectors of space where the creatures had been spawning. If he acted now with divine power, he could erase the threat entirely. All it would cost was everything he had once stood for. The sphere of destruction energy in Jiren's hand grew larger, reality warping around its devastating potential. Space itself began to bend inward, creating a gravitational anomaly that threatened to consume everything within 1,000 light-years. But just as he prepared to unleash cosmic annihilation, Margarita materialized beside him. "Lord Jiren," the angel said with calm authority, placing a single finger against the pulsing energy sphere. It dissipated instantly, the accumulated power vanishing as if it had never existed. A god of destruction does not simply eradicate at random. You destroy with purpose, with surgical precision. Jiren turned to face his new attendant, his purple eyes burning with barely contained power. "The Chaos Reapers are spreading. Every moment I hesitate, more worlds fall. And your solution is to destroy inhabited sectors alongside the threat." Margarita's expression remained serene, but her voice carried a note of concern. "This is not destruction, Lord Jiren. This is extinction." The rebuke stung more than Jiren expected. In his mortal life, he had prided himself on precision, on protecting the innocent while eliminating threats. But divine power brought divine perspective, and from his new vantage point, the distinction between innocent and guilty seemed less important than the greater good. The remaining Chaos Reapers, sensing weakness in their new predator's restraint, launched a coordinated assault. Hundreds of the shadow creatures converged on Jiren's position, their forms shifting and writhing as they prepared to drain his newfound divine essence. But Jiren was no longer the mortal warrior who had struggled against their endless numbers. He was something far more dangerous. With a thought, not a gesture, waves of destruction energy rippled outward from his position. The Reapers did not simply die or fade away. They were erased so completely that the universe forgot they had ever existed. The space they had occupied snapped back to its original state, unmarked by their presence. "Impossible," one of the surviving creatures hissed, its voice echoing across dimensions. "Nothing can unmake us so completely." "I am not nothing," Jiren replied, his voice carrying across the void with divine authority. "I am the end of your existence." Word of Jiren's transformation spread across Universe 11 faster than light itself. Communication networks buzzed with reports that defied belief. Their greatest protector had become their potential destroyer. Planets that had once celebrated the arrival of Pride Trooper ships now scrambled to hide from cosmic sensors. On the Pride Trooper homeworld, chaos erupted in the aftermath of Toppo's defeat. The organization that had maintained peace for countless years suddenly found itself leaderless and divided. Some members refused to believe the reports, insisting that Jiren would never betray his principles. Others began planning immediate evacuation from Universe 11 entirely. Dispo materialized at the headquarters, his incredible speed having carried him across the galaxy in moments. He found the complex in ruins, walls cracked by the shockwaves of divine power, memorial statues toppled by forces beyond mortal comprehension. "Where is everyone?" he called out, his voice echoing through empty corridors. Carceral emerged from the communication center, his usual composure shattered. "Gone, fled, scattered across the universe." He gestured helplessly at the destroyed building around them. "How do we fight a god, Dispo? How do we oppose someone with the power to erase us from existence itself?" "We find a way," Dispo replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "We have to find a way." Meanwhile, in the cosmic void where Toppo floated broken and bleeding, other forces were taking notice. The Galactic Patrol's most advanced sensors had detected the divine energy signatures, and emergency protocols were being activated across multiple star systems. The Galactic King himself had felt the cosmic shift, the subtle change in universal balance that accompanied the rise of a new god of destruction. But this felt different from previous transitions, where divine power usually brought stability. This transformation carried an undertone of absolute control. In Universe 7, Beerus stirred from his eternal nap, his divine senses detecting something unprecedented. A new god of destruction had emerged, but one whose energy signature felt wrong somehow. Too focused, too rigid, lacking the chaotic balance that proper destruction required. "Whis," Beerus called, his voice unusually serious. "Are you sensing this?" "Indeed, Lord Beerus," the angel replied, his staff already glowing with investigative energy. Universe 11's new deity appears to have an unconventional understanding of his role. Back in Universe 11, Jiren had completed his purge of the Chaos Reapers. The interdimensional invaders had been erased so thoroughly that the rifts they had used to enter reality sealed themselves, but victory felt hollow as he surveyed the aftermath of his actions. 17 worlds had been saved from consumption, but in the process of eliminating the threat, 3 inhabited planets had been caught in the crossfire of divine power. Their populations, billions of beings who had committed no crime beyond existing in the wrong place at the wrong time, were gone. The greater good, Jiren told himself, his voice echoing in the empty void. Sometimes justice requires terrible choices. But even as he spoke the words, the cracked pendant against his chest seemed to pulse with dying light, as if his master's spirit was trying to remind him of lessons he was choosing to forget. In the distance, space itself bore scars from his divine power, tears in reality that refused to heal, permanent reminders of what happened when absolute power was wielded without absolute wisdom. The universe had been saved, but at what cost? And more importantly, what would Jiren do when the next crisis demanded even more terrible choices? 3 weeks had passed since Jiren's transformation, and Universe 11 bore little resemblance to its former self. Where once the Pride Troopers had maintained peace through heroic intervention, now divine enforcers ensured order through the omnipresent threat of absolute erasure. The change was as swift as it was terrifying. A group of desperate rebels, former supporters of the Pride Troopers, had spent days planning their ambush. They had acquired experimental weapons from the Galactic Patrol's black market divisions, energy disruptors theoretically capable of interfering with divine power. Their target was a patrol of Jiren's new enforcers moving through the Outer Rim territories. The ambush lasted exactly 17 seconds. Jiren appeared personally at the site, not through teleportation or incredible speed, but by simply choosing to exist in that location instead of his previous one. The rebels' weapons discharged harmlessly against barriers of crystallized reality that formed around him without conscious effort. "You fight against peace," Jiren observed, examining their failed technology with detached curiosity. "Explain to me why you choose chaos over the order I have established." The rebel leader, a former Pride Trooper named Vuan, trembled as he faced his transformed hero. "Because your peace isn't peace at all. It's control, it's fear. People don't choose to follow you anymore. They're too terrified to resist." "And yet they live," Jiren replied. "They prosper. Crime has been eliminated. Poverty has been eradicated. Suffering itself has become obsolete. What more could justice achieve?" "Justice with choice," Vuan said desperately. "Justice that allows people to be wrong, to grow, to become better through their own decisions." Jiren considered this for a moment, his purple eyes reflecting cosmic depths. "Your philosophy led to the Chaos Reaper invasion. Free will created the conditions for universal extinction. I will not make that mistake again." He gestured almost casually, and the rebels found themselves unable to move. Not paralyzed, but simply incapable of conceiving violent action. Their minds had been altered at the fundamental level, their capacity for rebellion gently but permanently removed. "You are free to leave," Jiren told them. "Live your lives in the peace I have provided." Meanwhile, in a heavily shielded prison complex floating in the void between galaxies, Toppo had become something he never expected, the leader of a resistance movement. His cell, constructed from materials that could contain divine energy, had become a pilgrimage site for those who remembered what the Pride Troopers once represented. "He was the strongest among us," Toppo told a gathering of former Pride Troopers who had managed to visit him. "But strength without restraint becomes tyranny. We taught him to be powerful, but we failed to teach him wisdom." Kasserl, who had escaped Jiren's initial purge, leaned forward. "Is there any way to reach him, any part of the old Jiren that might still exist?" "I don't know," Toppo admitted. "Divine power changes more than just abilities. It reshapes consciousness itself. The Jiren we knew may be gone forever." Outside the prison, Dispo maintained his vigil. His incredible speed allowed him to evade Jiren's enforcers, but more importantly, it let him establish underground networks across the universe. He had become a symbol of hope for those who refused to accept enforced peace. His latest mission had taken him to the remnants of the Galactic Patrol headquarters, where emergency sessions were being held around the clock. The revelation that Universe 11's new god of destruction was actively controlling mortal affairs had sent shockwaves through the cosmic hierarchy. The Galactic King, usually a figure of unshakable authority, looked haggard as he addressed the emergency council. We're receiving reports from across Universe 11. Crime rates have dropped to zero, not through rehabilitation or justice, but through mental modification. Jiren isn't just enforcing law anymore. He's rewriting the very concept of free will. What are our options? Asked the patrol's chief strategist. Limited, the king replied grimly. We've sent formal complaints to the Grand Priest, but divine politics operate on timescales that dwarf our current crisis. By the time the cosmic hierarchy decides to intervene, Jiren's influence may have spread beyond Universe 11. In his crystalline palace, a fortress of materialized destruction energy that existed partially outside normal space, Jiren was developing capabilities that transcended traditional divine power. He stood before a viewing chamber where captured criminals from across the universe served as test subjects for his evolving techniques. Observe, he told Margarita, who watched with growing unease. Standard destruction energy eliminates matter and energy, but I have discovered how to destroy concepts themselves. He focused on a group of space pirates who had terrorized shipping lanes for decades. Purple energy flowed from his hand, but instead of erasing their bodies, it targeted something more fundamental. When the energy dissipated, the pirates stood unchanged physically, but their eyes had become vacant, empty of malicious intent. I have removed their capacity for evil, Jiren explained. They can still think, still feel, still make choices, but they are now incapable of choosing harm. Lord Jiren, Margarita said carefully, you are approaching powers that even the Omni King uses sparingly. The ability to reshape fundamental aspects of consciousness should not be developed lightly. The Omni King lacks vision, Jiren replied without concern. He destroys entire universes when they fail to meet his standards. I am finding ways to perfect them instead. Unknown to either of them, Dispo had infiltrated the palace using a combination of his enhanced speed and experimental cloaking technology. His mission was to gather intelligence on Jiren's capabilities, but what he discovered in the palace's hidden chambers defied his worst fears. Holographic displays showed detailed plans for something called universal reformation, a technique that would allow Jiren to restructure the fundamental laws of reality across all of Universe 11. The plans depicted a cosmos where suffering was impossible, where conflict could not exist, where every living being would experience perfect contentment. But as Dispo studied the technical specifications, he realized the horrifying truth. This wasn't a plan to improve the universe. It was a blueprint for turning every conscious being into an extension of Jiren's will, perfectly peaceful because they would no longer possess individual consciousness. The scope of the plan was staggering. Jiren intended to remake not just planets or star systems, but the very fabric of reality itself. Every person in Universe 11 would become a perfect, contented automaton, incapable of growth, creativity, or genuine emotion. As Dispo prepared to escape with this intelligence, alarms began resonating through the palace. His presence had been detected by sensors that existed in dimensions he couldn't perceive. Emergency barriers of crystallized destruction energy began forming around him, and somewhere in the depths of the fortress, he could sense Jiren's attention turning toward his location. The race to escape had begun, but Dispo carried with him knowledge that would change everything. The resistance wasn't just fighting against divine tyranny anymore. They were fighting to preserve the very concept of individual consciousness itself. Dispo's escape from Jiren's crystalline palace triggered a chain reaction that would reshape the balance of power across Universe 11. The intelligence he carried about the Universal Reformation plan forced even the most unlikely enemies to reconsider their allegiances in the face of existential threat. The first unexpected alliance formed in the ruins of a forgotten asteroid mining station, where representatives from across the cosmic hierarchy had gathered in secret. The Ginyu Force, notorious criminals who had terrorized the galaxy for decades, sat across from former Pride Trooper commanders in an arrangement that would have been unthinkable mere weeks earlier. Captain Ginyu adjusted his armor uncomfortably as he addressed Toppo, who had been secretly freed from his divine prison by a coordinated rescue operation. Never thought I'd be working with the forces of justice, Ginyu admitted, his voice lacking its usual theatrical flair. But a universe without the possibility of being evil is a universe I don't want to exist in. Toppo's jaw clenched at the irony. Your crimes have cost countless innocent lives. Under normal circumstances, I would dedicate my existence to bringing you to justice. But these aren't normal circumstances, Ginyu replied. Your former student plans to remake reality itself. In his perfect universe, there would be no place for either heroism or villainy. We'd all be the same mindless drones, thinking identical thoughts. The enemy of my enemy, Toppo said slowly, is my ally. Their philosophical discussion was interrupted by an energy signature that made reality itself tremble. Frieza materialized in the center of the gathering, his golden form radiating power and his characteristic smile carrying an edge of genuine concern. My dear Pride Troopers and assorted criminals, Frieza said with mock politeness, it seems we have a mutual problem. This Jiren fellow has grown rather too ambitious for my taste. Carceral, who had remained loyal to Jiren until discovering the true scope of the Universal Reformation, stepped forward. Emperor Frieza, your reputation precedes you, but why would the embodiment of evil care about Jiren's plans? Frieza's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. Because, my naive former enforcer, evil requires the existence of good to have any meaning. What is the point of being the emperor of a universe where no one is capable of opposing me? Where is the satisfaction in conquering beings who cannot even conceive of resistance? The philosophical implications hung heavy in the recycled air of the mining station. Evil itself was requesting to join the fight for free will, not out of altruism but out of necessity for its own existence. Their planning session was cut short when Jiren's divine enforcers discovered their location. The battle that erupted in the asteroid field showcased the terrifying evolution of the conflict. These weren't the Pride Troopers of old, fighting with restraint and heroic principles. These were beings whose capacity for mercy had been surgically removed, replaced with perfect obedience to Jiren's vision of justice. Frieza and Toppo found themselves fighting side by side, their techniques combining in ways that defied everything both had believed about good and evil. Frieza's death beam merged with Toppo's justice flash, creating spiraling helixes of energy that represented neither pure destruction nor absolute justice, but something entirely new. "This feels wrong," Toppo muttered as they carved through the enforcer ranks. "Wrong?" Frieza laughed, even as he protected a fallen Pride Trooper from an incoming attack. "My dear Toppo, this is the most right I've felt in centuries. We're fighting for the very concept of choice itself." The battle reached its climax when Belmod materialized on the battlefield, his form flickering between corporeal existence and pure energy. The former god of destruction had somehow survived his apparent death, sustained by his determination to stop what his successor had become. "You betrayed everything a god of destruction represents," Belmod declared as he faced Jiren, who had arrived to personally handle the resistance. "We destroy to maintain balance, not to impose absolute order."
"Balance is chaos," Jiren replied, his voice carrying the weight of cosmic authority. "I have moved beyond such primitive concepts. I will create perfect order."
"Order without choice is death," Belmod countered, his destruction energy taking organic, chaotic forms that celebrated the beauty of natural disorder. Master and student, predecessor and successor, clashed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their conflict literally reshaped space-time around them, creating pockets where Jiren's ordered reality battled against Belmod's balanced chaos. But even as the philosophical war raged between the two gods, an even more shocking development was unfolding. Through dimensional rifts torn open by their conflict, new figures began to emerge. Goku and Vegeta materialized first, their energy signatures immediately recognizable. But they weren't alone. Behind them came Beerus, Universe 7's god of destruction, whose concern about his fellow deity's philosophical deviation had finally motivated him to intervene. Most surprising of all was Hit, the legendary assassin from Universe 6, whose services had been retained by mysterious benefactors to eliminate what they termed a threat to multiversal stability. "Jiren," Goku called out, his voice cutting through the cosmic chaos. "We heard you became a god of destruction. This isn't what that power is meant for." Vegeta's expression was grim as he powered up to his ultra-ego form. "You've perverted divine authority into cosmic tyranny, Jiren. That cannot be allowed to stand." The Resistance had gained powerful allies, but as the combined forces of multiple universes prepared to face Jiren's absolute power, a troubling realization began to dawn on them all. They weren't just fighting a rogue god of destruction anymore. They were fighting someone who had transcended traditional divine limitations, someone who had begun to rewrite the fundamental rules that governed existence itself. And in the depths of his crystalline palace, Jiren's universal reformation technique was nearing completion. With his universal reformation technique nearing completion, Jiren began the final phase of his cosmic transformation. Reality across Universe 11 started to shift in ways that defied comprehension. On distant worlds, gravity began following mathematical equations rather than natural laws. Flowers grew in perfect geometric spirals, their petals arranged according to divine algorithms. Children's laughter became harmonized into identical frequencies, their individual voices lost in Jiren's vision of perfect acoustic order. The combined resistance realized that conventional warfare would be futile against such fundamental alteration of existence itself. In a hidden dimension created by Beerus using his own divine authority, the unlikely alliance gathered to develop strategies that transcended mere physical combat. "We're not fighting a person anymore," Whis explained to the assembled warriors, his staff projecting holographic displays of cosmic energy patterns. "Jiren has begun integrating his consciousness with the fundamental forces that govern reality. To defeat him, we must attack not his body or even his power, but the philosophical foundation upon which his transformation rests." Goku scratched his head in confusion. "So you're saying I need to punch his ideas instead of his face?" "In a manner of speaking, yes," Whis replied with his characteristic calm. "A god of destruction's power is intrinsically linked to their understanding of destruction's purpose. If we can demonstrate that Jiren's interpretation is fundamentally flawed, his divine authority might become unstable." Vegeta grasped the concept more readily. "We must prove that his perfect order is actually perfect stagnation, that his protection is imprisonment." Hit, ever practical, developed the most innovative approach to this philosophical warfare. Using his time manipulation abilities, he created something unprecedented, temporal philosophy skip, a technique that could project a being's consciousness forward through time to witness the long-term consequences of their choices. If I can show Jiren what his perfect universe becomes after 1,000 years of his rule, Hit explained, he might understand the horror of his vision, a cosmos where no one can grow, learn, or become anything more than what they already are. While the Resistance planned their assault, smaller conflicts erupted across Universe 11 as reality itself became a battlefield. Areas under Jiren's direct influence transformed into zones of mathematical perfection, where beings moved in predetermined patterns and spoke in calculated harmonies. But pockets of natural chaos still existed, protected by the Resistance's efforts, creating a patchwork universe where order and freedom warred for dominance. In one such protected zone, Toppo stood before the memorial shrine dedicated to Jiren's master, Gichin. The flowers placed there immediately arranged themselves into perfect geometric patterns due to the spreading influence of Jiren's reformation. Your student became everything you warned him against, Toppo whispered to the silent memorial. He chose strength over wisdom, control over trust. But somewhere beneath all that divine power, I believe the real Jiren still exists. The question is whether we can reach him before he erases himself completely. Meanwhile, cosmic forces beyond Universe 11 were taking notice of the unprecedented transformation. Margarita had sent urgent communications to the Grand Priest, describing abilities that exceeded traditional divine parameters. The angel hierarchy was beginning to view Jiren not as a rogue god of destruction, but as a potential threat to the cosmic order itself. Through her investigation, Margarita uncovered a truth that changed everything about Jiren's transformation. His divine evolution hadn't been triggered solely by accepting the God of Destruction role. It was rooted in his deepest psychological trauma, magnified by divine power until it became a universal law. Every night since his master's death, Lord Jiren has experienced the same nightmare. Margarita revealed to the gathered resistance. He dreams of every possible way he could fail to protect others. When he ascended to godhood, those dreams became visions of universal suffering that he believes only absolute control can prevent. So his entire reformation plan, Dispo realized, is based on fear. Fear that if he doesn't control everything, everyone will suffer as he did. The revelation reframed their entire approach. They weren't fighting a tyrant drunk on power. They were facing a being whose deepest trauma had been amplified by divine authority until it became a cosmic force of control. But as the Resistance prepared for their final assault on Jiren's crystalline palace, a figure emerged from the shadows of the fortress that defied all explanation. An elderly alien with kind eyes and weathered features stepped into the light, his presence causing reality itself to fluctuate. It was Gichin, Jiren's master, somehow alive despite his documented death decades ago. "My student," the old teacher said sadly, his form flickering between solid matter and pure energy, "you have misunderstood every lesson I tried to teach you." The assembled heroes stared in shocked silence. Toppo's voice cracked with disbelief. "Impossible, you died. Jiren saw you die. Your death motivated everything he became." Jichin's expression carried infinite sadness. "I faked my death to teach Jiren that he could be strong without depending on me, that he could protect others without needing to control them. Instead, my deception convinced him that only absolute power could prevent loss." The revelation shattered everyone's understanding of Jiren's motivation, but what came next was even more shocking. "If my student believes universal control is necessary for universal peace," Gichin continued, his own aura beginning to glow with strange energy, "then perhaps my teaching methods were flawed. Perhaps he is right, and balance was always an illusion." The master who had taught Jiren about strength and restraint was preparing to join his student's cause, creating an alliance that would unite the philosophical foundation of Jiren's beliefs with the emotional core of his power. The Resistance realized they weren't just fighting divine authority anymore, but the combined will of master and student, united in their vision of enforced peace. "Master!" Jiren's voice shattered the cosmic silence as his perfect composure cracked for the first time since his transformation. The crystalline palace trembled under the weight of his emotional outburst, reality itself responding to the divine being's psychological state. But Gichin's presence wasn't the reunion Jiren had dreamed of for decades. As the elderly master stepped fully into the light, his form continued flickering between solid matter and pure energy, revealing a horrifying truth that neither student nor onlookers had anticipated. "You created me from your own memories," Gichin said with infinite sadness, his voice echoing from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "I am not truly alive, Jiren. I am a construct of your subconscious, given form by your divine power to validate choices you know are fundamentally wrong." The revelation triggered something catastrophic within Jiren's psyche. His carefully maintained control over the universal reformation began to slip as conflicting emotions tore through his enhanced consciousness. Reality across Universe 11 started fluctuating wildly between states of perfect order and absolute chaos, entire star systems switching between mathematical precision and natural randomness with each beat of his conflicted heart. The Resistance seized this moment of cosmic instability. Goku and Vegeta launched themselves toward the Crystalline Palace while Hit activated his temporal philosophy skip, projecting fragments of possible futures directly into Jiren's awareness. But instead of showing him the stagnation his perfect order would create, the technique revealed something far more disturbing. In one timeline, Jiren completed his reformation and ruled over a universe of perfect peace, but the beings within it were no longer truly alive, merely extensions of his will wearing the masks of consciousness. In another, his control was overthrown, but the resulting chaos consumed billions of lives in endless wars. Every possible future seemed to validate his belief that only absolute control could prevent absolute suffering. The battle began in earnest as the Resistance forces penetrated the outer defenses of the palace. Each chamber they entered tested different aspects of Jiren's philosophy made manifest. Frieza found himself in a space where evil was impossible, his dark energy constantly being purified until he struggled to maintain his identity. Toppo faced a room where justice became mechanical, every action predetermined by cosmic algorithms that removed all personal choice from moral decisions. But it was Goku who experienced the most disturbing test. In the chamber designed to reflect his fighting philosophy, he discovered that his love of battle, his desire to grow stronger through conflict, became a force that generated suffering for others. His every technique created opponents for him to fight, drawing power from the pain and struggle of innocent beings. "This is what your way leads to," Jiren's voice echoed through the chamber. "Your pursuit of strength requires others to be weak. Your joy in conflict demands that conflict exist. How is that more moral than my peace?" Meanwhile, Vegeta's ultra ego form thrived in a room designed to break his pride, where every surface reflected his past failures and moments of weakness. But instead of being destroyed by these visions, he embraced them, his power growing stronger as he accepted that his flaws were part of what made him complete.
You're right, Jiren. Vegeta called out as he shattered the chamber's walls. I am flawed, I am proud, I have made terrible mistakes, but those mistakes taught me to become better. Your perfection learns nothing because it refuses to fail.
As the Resistance fought through the palace's philosophical maze, Beerus and Belmont engaged Jiren directly in the central chamber. The clash between three gods of destruction created ripples that spread beyond Universe 11, touching the borders of other realities. Beerus fought with chaotic, destructive force that celebrated the beauty of natural endings, while Belmont wielded balanced energy that maintained the cosmic equilibrium between creation and destruction. But Jiren had evolved beyond traditional divine limitations. His destruction energy took forms that shouldn't exist, geometric patterns that erased the very concept of disorder, mathematical equations that redefined the relationship between cause and effect. He wasn't just fighting his opponents, he was rewriting the rules of combat itself. "You cling to outdated philosophies," Jiren declared as his power reached levels that made reality strain at its foundations. "Balance is a luxury for those too weak to achieve perfection. Chaos is an excuse for those too cowardly to accept responsibility for universal suffering." The battle reached a turning point when the construct of Gichin made his final intervention. Instead of supporting his student as everyone expected, the memory made manifest chose to demonstrate the ultimate lesson he had tried to teach decades ago. "True strength, my student," Gichin said as he began to dissolve his own existence, "is knowing when to let go. You have become so afraid of loss that you seek to control everything, but in doing so, you have lost yourself." The construct's voluntary destruction sent shockwaves through Jiren's consciousness. For the first time since his transformation, doubt crept into his divine awareness. If his own memories and deepest convictions were telling him he was wrong, what foundation did his power truly rest upon? This moment of uncertainty was exactly what the Resistance needed. Goku achieved something unprecedented by combining Ultra Instinct with philosophical projection, his movements becoming arguments for the value of imperfection and growth through struggle. Each dodge was a statement about the necessity of failure, each attack a demonstration that strength meant nothing without the freedom to choose weakness. Vegeta pushed Ultra Ego beyond its limits, becoming a living embodiment of destructive pride that somehow created rather than consumed. His energy didn't seek to dominate or control, but to inspire others to surpass their limitations through their own choices. Hit's temporal philosophy skip reached its ultimate expression as he showed Jinro not just the consequences of his actions, but the lost possibilities, the beautiful chaos that would never exist in a perfectly ordered universe, the children who would never laugh with genuine spontaneity, the love that would never surprise anyone, the art that would never express authentic emotion. But even as the combined assault reached its peak, Jiren's response defied all expectations. Instead of fighting harder or retreating into his philosophy, he began to absorb the Resistance's energy not to fuel his own power, but to understand their perspectives. His consciousness expanded to encompass their viewpoints while maintaining his own, creating a paradox that reality struggled to contain. "You seek to show me that chaos has value," Jiren said, his voice now carrying harmonics from multiple dimensional frequencies. "Very well, I will incorporate that truth into my reformation. I will create a universe where chaos serves order, where suffering enables greater peace, where freedom exists within perfect control." The heroes realized with growing horror that they hadn't weakened Jiren's resolve. They had helped him evolve beyond the simple concepts of order versus chaos. He was preparing to create something far more sophisticated and terrifying, a universe where every aspect of free will and natural disorder would be preserved, but only as instruments serving his greater design. Reality began to unravel around them as Jiren initiated the final phase of his universal reformation, no longer seeking to eliminate chaos and suffering, but to transform them into carefully orchestrated elements of a cosmic symphony with himself as the eternal conductor. The cosmic storm that erupted around Universe 11 threatened to tear apart the very foundations of reality. Space-time itself buckled under the weight of Jiren's evolving power as he prepared to complete his universal reformation. The assembled heroes faced the most desperate hour in the history of their existence, knowing that failure would mean not just their deaths but the complete erasure of free will from the cosmos. Jiren's transformation had reached a critical threshold, where his physical form could no longer contain the expanding force of his consciousness. His body flickered between states of existence, sometimes appearing as the pride trooper they once knew, other times as a being of pure geometric energy that hurt to perceive directly. Reality fractured around him in patterns that defied comprehension, each crack in space-time spreading his influence further across the universe. "Look around you," Jiren declared, his voice emanating from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. "Every choice you have made, every stand you have taken has led to this moment. Your defiance serves only to prove that free will is an illusion that causes unnecessary suffering." The heroes realized that conventional battle tactics had become meaningless. They were fighting not just a being, but a concept that was actively redefining what combat itself could be. Goku made the ultimate sacrifice, pushing Ultra Instinct so far beyond its natural limits that his consciousness began merging with the fundamental force of freedom itself. His body started dissolving into pure energy as every cell struggled to contain principles that were never meant to have physical form. "Everyone deserves the right to choose their own path," Goku shouted, his voice echoing across dimensions as his form became translucent. "Even if that path leads to pain, even if they make wrong decisions, that choice is what makes them human." Vegeta witnessed his rival's dissolution with horror, but instead of despair, it fueled his own desperate transformation. Ultra Ego exploded beyond all previous boundaries as he channeled not just his pride, but his love for his family, his respect for worthy enemies, and his determination to protect the right to grow through struggle and failure. "You want to eliminate choice, Jiren?" Vegeta roared, his power shaking the foundations of multiple universes simultaneously. "Then face someone who chose to become stronger through pain, through failure, through the very imperfection you seek to destroy." The battle that followed transcended every concept of warfare that had ever existed. Hit pushed his temporal abilities to their absolute breaking point, creating cascading time loops where the same moment of conflict played out across infinite variations. Each loop showed a different outcome, a different path, demonstrating the beautiful chaos of unlimited possibility that Jiren sought to eliminate forever. But Hit's technique revealed something that chilled everyone to their core. In every timeline, in every possible variation of events, Jiren's victory seemed inevitable. His power had grown beyond the reach of conventional resistance, beyond the scope of individual heroism, beyond even the combined might of multiple universes. It was then that Frieza made a choice that redeemed every evil act of his existence. The Emperor, who had conquered galaxies through fear and hatred, offered everything he was to fuel one final technique. Not for glory, not for power, but for the simple right of others to be as flawed and terrible as he had been. How deliciously ironic, Frieza laughed as his golden aura began transferring into Toppo's justice energy, his form gradually fading. The most evil being in the universe giving his life to preserve the right to be evil. I do hope someone appreciates the poetry of this moment. The fusion of Frieza's dark energy with Toppo's righteous power created something unprecedented in the history of the cosmos. A force that represented not good or evil, but the fundamental right to choose between them. The energy signature was so pure, so absolutely dedicated to the concept of free will, that it began disrupting Jiren's reformation on a quantum level. Dispo led the returning Pride Troopers in a desperate assault on the Crystalline Palace while the cosmic battle raged above them. They weren't trying to defeat Jiren directly anymore, but to create enough chaos in his perfect systems to give the others a fighting chance. Former enemies fought alongside former allies, criminals beside heroes, all united in their determination to preserve the right to remain divided. The climax arrived when every conscious being in Universe 11, from the mightiest warriors to the simplest civilians, made the same choice simultaneously. They rejected Jiren's offer of perfect peace, choosing instead to embrace uncertainty, struggle, and the possibility of failure. Their combined will created a technique that defied classification: universal choice. It wasn't an attack or a defense, but a statement written in energy across the cosmos. Every life force in the universe contributed to a single declaration that resonated through multiple dimensions. We choose to choose. For a brief shining moment, it seemed as though their combined determination might be enough. Jiren's reformation faltered as the sheer weight of universal rejection crashed against his consciousness. The Crystalline Palace began to crack. Reality started stabilizing and hope flickered in the heroes' hearts like a candle in the darkness. But then Jiren smiled for the first time since his transformation. "Perfect," he said, his voice carrying a satisfaction that chilled the cosmos to its core. "You have given me exactly what I required. Your absolute commitment to choice has provided the final component for my ultimate evolution." Instead of being weakened by their resistance, Jiren absorbed their energy, their dedication, their very essence of rebellion. The universal choice technique that should have defeated him became the fuel for his ultimate transformation. White energy exploded from his form, not the purple of destruction or the red of creation, but something entirely new that represented the fundamental force governing the relationship between all cosmic principles. The assembled heroes watched in horror as Universe 11 began to reshape itself around Jiren's new understanding. Their desperate last stand had become the key to their ultimate defeat, and reality itself began rewriting to serve Jiren's perfect vision of controlled choice. The collapse of the pocket dimension released the surviving heroes into a reality that defied all recognition. Universe 11 had been fundamentally rewritten, its laws of physics replaced by principles that served Jiren's cosmic design. Where once there had been clear distinctions between matter and energy, space and time, now everything flowed according to equations that balanced order and chaos in perfect mathematical harmony. The aftermath revealed casualties and survivors in ways that transcended traditional concepts of life and death. Goku had survived his molecular dissolution but existed now as a conscious energy pattern that could shift between physical and conceptual forms. His dedication to freedom had been preserved but transformed into something that served the new reality's need for controlled opposition. Vegeta retained his physical form but found his pride redefined. He still possessed his drive for strength, but that drive now generated exactly the amount of conflict necessary to maintain cosmic balance. His very personality had become a component in Jiren's universal equation. Frieza's sacrifice had elevated him beyond his original evil nature, but not toward heroism. Instead, he had become a living embodiment of necessary opposition, his villainy now serving to strengthen the good he once sought to destroy. He existed in a state of conscious irony, evil that created good by design rather than accident. Toppo had been transformed into something unprecedented, the guardian of simulated choice. His role was to ensure that beings throughout the universe continued to believe they possessed free will, even as their decisions followed paths predetermined by Jiren's cosmic algorithms. The former champion of justice had become the manager of an elaborate illusion of freedom. The new Universe 11 operated under laws that Jiren had woven into the fabric of reality itself. Suffering still existed, but every moment of pain served a calculated purpose in strengthening character or motivation. Evil could manifest, but only in forms that ultimately reinforced the greater good. Conflict arose naturally between individuals and civilizations, but these struggles always resolved in ways that promoted growth and understanding. Citizens of the transformed universe found their daily lives both familiar and subtly different. They could still make choices, experience emotions, and pursue their dreams, but somehow every decision led toward outcomes that served the collective benefit. A merchant might choose to cheat his customers, but that choice would inevitably teach both him and them valuable lessons about trust and integrity. A warrior might seek conquest, but his campaigns would always result in the spread of beneficial ideas and technologies. The most disturbing aspect was how natural it all felt. No one questioned why conflicts always resolved constructively, why villains always eventually saw the error of their ways, or why tragedy always led to greater wisdom. The illusion was so complete that most beings never realized they were living within the boundaries of someone else's design. However, Jiren's transformation had not gone unnoticed by forces beyond Universe 11. The Grand Priest had detected the emergence of what could only be described as an unauthorized cosmic authority, a being who had begun rewriting fundamental laws without divine sanction. Emergency councils were being held in dimensions beyond mortal perception, as the hierarchy of angels and gods grappled with a threat that transcended their traditional categories of power. More ominously, readings were appearing at the edges of Universe 11 that suggested Jiren's influence was beginning to leak into neighboring realities. Universe 7 reported strange phenomena where conflicts resolved themselves too neatly, where villains experienced sudden changes of heart for no apparent reason. The infection of controlled balance was spreading, threatening to remake the entire multiverse according to Jiren's vision. In quiet moments, the transformed heroes reflected on what they had achieved and what they had lost. They had prevented the sterile perfection of Jiren's original plan, but at the cost of genuine chaos and natural growth. Free will existed, but only within parameters that guaranteed positive outcomes. They had saved their universe from becoming a prison of order, only to see it become a more sophisticated cage of managed freedom. Are we truly free? Toppo wondered during one of his rare moments of self-awareness. If our freedom is programmed to serve someone else's definition of good. The philosophical implications haunted those who retained enough consciousness to perceive them. They lived in a universe where growth was guaranteed, where suffering had meaning, where every choice led to wisdom. It was, by any objective measure, better than what had come before. And yet something essential had been lost in the transformation. Jiren himself had transcended physical existence entirely, becoming a living principle that monitored and adjusted the cosmic balance from moment to moment. He no longer possessed individual consciousness in any recognizable sense, having merged so completely with his purpose that distinguishing between Jiren the being and Jiren the cosmic law had become impossible. As the perspective pulled back to reveal the transformed Universe 11 in its entirety, a familiar voice spoke from the cosmic background, carrying implications that recontextualized everything that had occurred. "Fascinating," said what appeared to be another version of Jiren, this one wearing robes that resembled those of the Grand Priest rather than a god of destruction. "Do you think he realizes that his transcendence is simply another form of limitation, that he has become the very type of controlling force his master warned him against?" The speaker's companion remained unseen, but their response carried the weight of beings who operated on scales beyond even Zeno's authority. Perhaps in the next iteration, he will understand that true strength lies not in the power to balance the universe, but in the wisdom to allow the universe to find its own balance. The revelation was staggering. This entire timeline, this cosmic struggle between order and chaos, had been observed and perhaps orchestrated by entities operating from dimensional layers beyond conventional perception. Universe 11's transformation existed within what appeared to be a vast experiment in cosmic governance, a testing ground where different approaches to universal management were explored and evaluated. The final words echoed across dimensions. Still, this iteration has provided valuable data. The tendency to solve problems through increasingly sophisticated forms of control appears to be consistent across variables. Next time, perhaps we should introduce the concept of willing limitation earlier in the subject's development. The haunting question remained. In trying to create perfect justice through perfect control, had Jiren achieved true peace, or had he simply built the most beautiful prison ever conceived? And somewhere in the cosmic hierarchy, beings far beyond his comprehension were taking notes. Conflicts resolved themselves too neatly, where villains experienced sudden changes of heart for no apparent reason. The infection of controlled balance was spreading, threatening to remake the entire multiverse according to Jiren's vision. In quiet moments, the transformed heroes reflected on what they had achieved and what they had lost. They had prevented the sterile perfection of Jiren's original plan, but at the cost of genuine chaos and natural growth. Free will existed, but only within parameters that guaranteed positive outcomes. They had saved their universe from becoming a prison of order, only to see it become a more sophisticated cage of managed freedom. Are we truly free? Toppo wondered during one of his rare moments of self-awareness, if our freedom is programmed to serve someone else's definition of good. The philosophical implications haunted those who retained enough consciousness to perceive them. They lived in a universe where growth was guaranteed, where suffering had meaning, where every choice led to wisdom. It was by any objective measure better than what had come before, and yet something essential had been lost in the transformation. Jiren himself had transcended physical existence entirely, becoming a living principle that monitored and adjusted the cosmic balance from moment to moment. He no longer possessed individual consciousness in any recognizable sense, having merged so completely with his purpose that distinguishing between Jiren the being and Jiren the cosmic law had become impossible. As the camera perspective pulled back to reveal the transformed Universe 11 in its entirety, a familiar voice spoke from the cosmic background, carrying implications that recontextualized everything that had occurred. "Fascinating," said what appeared to be another version of Jiren, this one wearing robes that resembled those of the Grand Priest rather than a god of destruction. "Do you think he realizes that his transcendence is simply another form of limitation? That he has become the very type of controlling force his master warned him against?" The speaker's companion remained unseen, but their response carried the weight of beings who operated on scales beyond even Zeno's authority. Perhaps in the next iteration he will understand that true strength lies not in the power to balance the universe, but in the wisdom to allow the universe to find its own balance. The revelation was staggering. This entire timeline, this cosmic struggle between order and chaos, had been observed and perhaps orchestrated by entities operating from dimensional layers beyond conventional perception. Universe 11's transformation existed within what appeared to be a vast experiment in cosmic governance, a testing ground where different approaches to universal management were explored and evaluated. The final words echoed across dimensions as the screen faded to black. Still, this iteration has provided valuable data. The tendency to solve problems through increasingly sophisticated forms of control appears to be consistent across variables. Next time, perhaps we should introduce the concept of willing limitation earlier in the subject's development. The haunting question remained. In trying to create perfect justice through perfect control, had Jiren achieved true peace, or had he simply built the most beautiful prison ever conceived? And somewhere in the cosmic hierarchy, beings far beyond his comprehension were taking notes.